Hello, and welcome to this slideshow. This is the second in a series where I, Bones, tell Jake, a dinosaur, about what Magic was like in the past. This time, I'm going to talk through the four sets that released in 2007 and what playing casual Magic was like broadly at that time. Hello, Jake. What were you doing this year instead of playing Magic?
Bones, I'm not sure my answer is different, which I don't think is, inventive, but we were playing RuneScape still. And for those who didn't listen last time, yeah, RuneScape was still very cool in 2007, probably less cool than in 2006, but that hadn't stopped us. At this point, we had sunk hundreds of hours into the game, which means it was just barely getting good in true MMO fashion.
Yeah,
Once you sink that cost, it's hard to unsink it.
yeah, understood. I mean, I'm one to talk. I had many hobbies that persisted for years and years and years, so my 2006 was also not a lot different from my 2007. Here's some specifics, and maybe this will help jog your memory about what could have been different for you. For me, it was the sophomore and junior year of high school, and I turned 16. I was excited about watching Pirates of the Caribbean 3 and I Am Legend. I was listening to Maroon 5. I was playing Pokemon Diamond on the DS, and then at the very end of this year, Halo 3 on the 360, which I had received as a gift explicitly for the purpose of playing Halo 3. And I was playing the constructible strategy game Pirates of the Spanish Main and Heroescape.
I was probably also playing Heroescape at this time then, because I had a neighbor who was very into it. I never owned it, but we did play at their house, just the original set. And as you set the stage for what was going on, I think The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess was a big game in my life at this
Yeah,
point. We
yeah.
were an early adopter of the Wii. We got it for Christmas in 2006, which means Wii Sports, Twilight Princess, and other early Wii titles were a big deal for us at this time. I wonder if Super Smash Bros. For the Wii had come out this year. I think the answer might be yes, but we were playing a ton of the Wii.
2008. Nope.
2008.
Yep.
Well, spoilers
Next year.
for the next video,
Yep.
but I think the other key thing that I was doing in this time, this was when I really got into my inheritance cycle phase of reading, and I think Eldest was the most recent book at this time.
Oh, okay.
So I was definitely reading that book too many times that year.
You were just back to back as soon as you finished the book, started over.
Yeah, I was definitely guilty of that in this phase of life. I reread books far less frequently these days, but at this point in life, I was a frequent rereader.
Yeah. What else do you have to do? Well, that's what Jake was doing, and what I was doing. But what I was doing that Jake wasn't doing is getting further into Magic. So, to set the stage, as you can already tell from this background image, the cards that were good this year are some bangers.
What a year. You are showing me four cards, all fantastic in the Bodleian Cube, at least three of which I really just don't see ever having a desire to cut.
I'm going to guess the one that you might cut is Cryptic Command.
It's actually Damnation. If there were a printed version of this that didn't have the regenerate text, I would be
I
very
see.
tempted to
Gotcha.
move over to it.
Okay.
Even though it's an absolute classic card, there's no regenerate. I think these other three, a version of the cube where Cryptic Command isn't a great four drop would just not be interesting to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's what the good players are playing that came out this year. Here's what I was doing instead. White and red are still my favorite colors, which is why those are the cards that are on the screen. But some of the things I was learning about the history of the game, I received this Wing Shards promo, an FNM promo on the left, and discovered that it also was not legal in standard and was pretty salty about that because I thought it was a super cool card. And then this middle card, Jaya Ballard, I do not remember what product this comes from. I see these all the time in the shop that I work at. I know this is some promo that came with like something that was sold at big box stores or like in a starter kit of some kind. But I thought this card was so cool. And this is a time spiral card that I didn't even get all the references on. If the template of this looks familiar to you at all, Planeswalkers were originally going to debut in Future Sight and then got pushed off to Lorwyn later this year. But Jaya Ballard was a famous Planeswalker in the lore, and spell shapers were kind of like Planeswalkers. They're something that you play that then plays its own spells. And so I think this was like kind of a prototype that didn't make sense as a joke until Planeswalkers came out. And then you can kind of see, oh, this is like little effect, bigger effect, ultimate effect.
Yeah, I see how this is a prototype of a planeswalker where you're paying mana and discarding cards to get the 3 different effects that are there. That's actually pretty interesting, especially because I recently have been thinking about what it would be like if there were planeswalkers that had costs like mana and discarding cards for some of their abilities. I'm sure that discarding a card is a cost for some planeswalker abilities somewhere, but particularly how it would be to balance, say a cheap planeswalker that has to pay mana to activate some of the abilities.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I know we have like the Duretti, the black red Duretti that you have to sack a creature to do its effect.
Yeah, there are definitely costs, but
There's not a lot of additional costs to activate abilities.
right. And I think gating it behind mana would be interesting. This is a prototype of that.
Yeah, and the cool thing they did with Jaya Ballard, so she was in the lore, she was in the novels, but she was also a character that was recurring on flavor text. So over here on the right, you can see this is flavor text of Pyroblast. Her top ability is almost exactly Pyroblast. It is doesn't have the counter spell effect, but it has the destroy blue permanent. And then her middle ability is Incinerate, and again, it's her flavor text. Do you know the name of her final ability?
I don't. 6 is a lot.
It is Inferno,
That's great art.
and great flavor text.
That's very cool that they're all cards, and I commend them for making the decision not to just have this be red tap, discard a card, counter
Yeah,
target blue spell,
yeah,
because that would be miserable.
that would be pretty heinous. I have to imagine that a version of this card was designed like that, and that there were probably many arguments in R&D like, come on, the other two are exactly what the ability does. Players going to get confused if it's not exactly what the ability does. And then play design going, listen, I get what you're trying to design here. You can't do that.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you all the way. That definitely existed to start, and then someone correctly said, we can't just have a static blue hosing counter spell on this card.
So that's what I was doing, getting my free cards from products and from attending F&M. What I also was doing was reading the books. I got the Planar Chaos Fat Pack first. And if you haven't seen them before or don't remember, the Fat Packs were what bundles are now. And they came with 2 storage boxes, 6 booster packs, I think, and a book, a novel.
That's crazy. So for every 6 booster packs in this, you just also got a novel.
You probably wouldn't buy more than one because the storage boxes would all look the same. It was more popular to wait until the next set released and then buy that new fat pack. Then you have different art on your storage boxes and you have a different novel. You don't want to end up with a bunch of the same novel. So in the modern age, it makes sense to buy multiple bundles if you want a lot of the special dice or a lot of the one storage box. But back then, it really didn't.
Yeah, it checks out. I think it just speaks to perhaps a different speed of consumption of the game.
I'm going to tell you about the 4 products that released in 2007, a bit of a different pace than we're at today. How many of the characters on the front of these novels do you recognize?
Is Gerard the character on the
Nope.
Planar Chaos novel?
This is long after Gerard.
All right. I think we're on 0 then.
Okay. So the unifying theme of these covers is that the back character is a planeswalker and the front character is a not planeswalker asterisk.
Oh, is that Karn in the middle?
That is Karn in the middle. So at the time of the time spiral in the flavor, planeswalkers prior to this were all powerful. Their bodies on planes communicating with little mortals was just a manifestation of a greater being that was just giving itself an avatar to communicate with you. If you annihilated Teferi's body, he could reform it in any form he wanted. They just had shapes that they liked, but they were all powerful. They could do anything they wanted, effectively. And that is very difficult to make a compelling storyline with. When your main characters, the only characters that can go between your planes that you're designing, can't be killed and are like supermen that just barely care about mortal life if they're altruistic.
Okay, yeah, this is checking out to me.
So the fix, they had what was called the time crisis or like a temporal incident, something like that. There were time rifts opening up on Dominaria to other planes, to other times, and causing chaos. And that's some of what we see in the suspend mechanic, the arts from the previous set, where they're coming through like a blue portal, is things coming from out of time or from different worlds. And the plot of these books is that Teferi figures out a way to close these rifts and mend the rifts that are opening up and tearing apart reality. And this is what it will ultimately be called the mending. All of the rifts get sealed up, and all of the limitless power of planeswalkers gets bottled into basically very powerful mages
Who can now be cards.
who can now be cards and make sense as cards.
Right. And so this is why in Brothers War, the Urza Planeswalker is a meld.
Yes.
Because they wanted to be appropriately powerful to the original lore of Planeswalkers.
Right. Original Urza, they said for a long time, would never have a card because he died before the mending, and therefore there was no way to ever give him a card that was appropriately powerful for what they were like back then.
And so he just needed 2 cards.
He just needed 2 cards. And now he has what, 4 abilities?
I think he has like 7.
Okay. We'll see. It's a crazy card. So anyway, these 3 characters in the back, the top left one is Teferi. You can see his spined staff kind of curving over there in the corner.
Okay, yeah.
The middle one is Karn. He was first created by Urza to do time travel, so I suspect that that background there is him in one time and another time.
That makes sense.
The back right character is Jeska. Do you know anything about Jeska?
She has a card called Thrice Reborn.
Mm-hmm. Do you know why?
Nope. I merely know that that's a card name.
Excellent. So Jeska is Kamal Pitfighter's sister. They're both human barbarians when they were their first creatures. And they're raised by Balthor the Stout, who's a dwarf. And Jeska ends up getting killed by the Cabal Patriarch, or at least turned into an undead monster called Phage the Untouchable.
Okay, I've heard of Phage the Untouchable.
And then Kamal gets the Mirari, which is like a wish-granting orb. Kamal chops with his powerful sword Akroma, the Angel of Wrath, and Phage the Untouchable at the same time, and they merge into Corona, False God.
I've never heard of that last card ever.
Corona False God is the plot of Onslaught. If you've seen the Decree cycle, like Decree of Annihilation and Decree of the one that destroys all creatures, Decree of Pain, I think.
I've definitely seen these cards, but the name is
okay.
Not good.
That's fine. Her shadow is on the Decree cycle. Anyway, Corona is all powerful and then leaves the plane and then ends up defusing and results in just Jeska as herself as a planeswalker. She's no longer Phage. She's no longer Corona. She's just Jeska, and that's why she is thrice touched, because she first became Phage, then became Corona, then became a planeswalker.
Wow, that's quite a life.
So these 3 planeswalkers are instrumental in the resolving of the time crisis. Teferi gives up his planeswalker spark to seal a rift. I can't remember exactly how Karn does it, but Karn seals one as well, and it takes a lot out of him, but it doesn't cost him his planeswalker spark. And then Jeska has the clever idea, because she sees Freyalise die. Freyalise, the elf planeswalker, seals up the rift that's over her Wirewood Forest, where all of her elves live, that she's like the patron god of, and it kills her. In the process of sealing up the time rift, she dies.
Mm-hmm.
So Jeska doesn't want that to happen to her. So over here on the left, bottom left, is Radha, who has had 4 cards, and you probably only know the most recent ones.
No, I am aware of. I think so. Heir to Keld is the one that taps for green and attacks and creates red.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have Grand Warlord Radha, which attacks, and for each attacking creature you get red or green.
Mm-hmm.
And then Heart of Keld is the M21 card, which I'm familiar with. And then there's a DMU Radha that has Domain and does something pretty unremarkable.
Way to go! Yeah, you are on it. That's correct. You know all the Radhas. Good job.
For whatever reason, original Radha was in one of my friend's kitchen table decks when we first started playing.
I see.
As
okay.
was Grand Warlord Radha. So I saw those cards. I have no idea how they came to have those cards, but they were in our pool in kitchen table Magic.
That's awesome. Okay, so Radha is an elf warrior. She was originally a barbarian, but because she's an elf, she's also associated with Freyalise. But because she's not fully an elf, she's a barbarian, Freyalise doesn't like her that much, but she still owes everything to Freyalise like all the elves do. Once Freyalise gives up her spark in her life, Jeska is like, hey Radha, I have a use for you, come with me. And then Jeska basically starts trying to close up rifts using Radha as a tool to filter out the damaging effects of what could cost her life. Instead, it's going to cost her this non-planeswalker's life. The reason that that was able to happen is that Radha and Venser are the first of kind of proto-planeswalkers. They were able to tap into the ability to go between planes a little bit. but they weren't all powerful like regular planeswalkers. Something about the time crisis awakened these like neo planeswalker sparks, and it was something that no one had ever seen before. And Jessica was like, I bet I can use that. And she was right. Rada almost died, and her spark was completely used up, which is why Rada never has a planeswalker card. Venser's does not get used up, and therefore he gets to be a planeswalker, and he gets his first card in a couple years.
Is Venser the middle guy?
Venser is the middle guy. Yep.
Nice.
On the right, we have Joyra. She was childhood friends with Teferi. She drank some wellspring water that had like time magic seeping into it, and she is effectively immortal as a result. She is one of the characters that has been around on Dominaria the longest, knows a lot of the planeswalkers, and they all know her because she's been here so long, but she's not a planeswalker herself. She's just a very powerful artificer and mage.
I have heard of her. I did not recognize her in this art. But as our listeners will learn, I know very little about the Magic story.
So that's your quick lore lesson. I love these books. I think they're so cool. One of them has a showdown between Leshrac, the Walker of the Night, and Nicol Bolas, which are both like major villains, and they're both trying to out-villain each other through the whole fight, and it's extremely funny. I'm going to send you just that excerpt sometime because I think you'll enjoy it.
Perfect.
Okay, so I was reading the books, I was playing the game. But what's more important is Planar Chaos came out. First set to come out in 2007. What do you know about this set?
What do I know about Planar Chaos? I believe this is a set where we have some explicit color prep breaks that are taking place.
Technically, they are bends, and that is this color shifted sheet. Now, some of them probably are breaks, but the goal was that everything was being color shifted into colors that it could do. So, do you recognize all the original cards that these four are based on?
The Manti, this Force Spike, Sarah Sphinx is Sarah Angel. Reckless Worm is a black card, but I don't know what it is.
Nope.
Maybe it's a green card.
Yep.
And Groundbreaker is Ball Lightning.
Yeah. Reckless Worm is Arrogant Worm. So the idea was that all of these were still within Color Pie. And that just wasn't quite right. For example, Harmonize is from this sheet, and I don't think they would ever print Harmonize again. They want draw to be tied to creatures in green.
Yeah, they would just print a 5/5 that ETBs and draws 3 cards.
There you go. Tied to creatures.
Also 5 mana. But yeah, Harmonize is one of the cards I was thinking of from this that is breaking. Although at the time, I guess there are other white counter spells.
Not yet. Lapse of Certainty is going to be in Alara block, which isn't here yet.
Okay, so this is the first white counterspell. So was that a change to the color pie in order to make that one possible, or had they always said that white could have counterspells and just didn't yet?
I think the fact that white can tax, it does do taxing effects. Thalia hasn't released yet, but there's a card that is just like Thalia that's not legendary. The name is escaping me, but it's on the screen right now. It's like a cleric, and it does the same thing that Thalia does. So like taxing was always part of it. And I think that their logic here was, it's just taxing a spell on the stack. And the effect of that is not exactly the same as a tax.
Sarah Sphinx feels the cleanest of all of these.
Sure.
I do think this is very cool.
Also, Planar Chaos, the mechanics are the same as Time Spiral. Again, this is a small set based on the large set. This is still the old three set block model. The most major mechanical difference is that we have kicker cards in Planar Chaos. There was actually no kicker in Time Spiral, believe it or not. And for the first time, in this set, we have monocolor split cards. Both sides are the same color. We have mismatched echo costs. Previously, they just wrote echo, because echo meant pay the same cost again or sacrifice it. And in this set, we get new and weird echo costs that are either much lower than the cost, much higher than the cost. The point is, it's a design tool that they can modulate to change how echo works exactly. The third thing we get for the first time is vanishing. That's the main mechanic of this set. Time Spiral block is Time Spiral based on the past, Planar Chaos based on the present, and Future Sight based on the future. And so something that the mechanic that they wanted to represent the present is something that is fading away. And that is where we got Vanishing, which was a fixed version of Fading from Nemesis. And then the other fun fact about the set is that there are 0 artifacts. Even though perhaps one of the most famous Fading cards, Tanglewire, is an artifact, there's no artifacts in this whole set.
I guess that happens, but it's not common.
If I draw your attention to the top right here, this is a lot of the product that I was buying. I did buy the fat pack on the bottom left there, That's what the book was inside of, one of those big boxes. But at the top right, I bought that Unraveling Mind starter deck and Endless March starter decks, and those are themed around madness and what we call the rescuer mechanic, where you're just bouncing your own things to your hand. White Mane Lion is going to be in this set and is a big deal. And the cover card there, Calciderm, is a 5/5 Vanishing 4 for 2 white white. So you get this. Oh, and Shroud. Can't be targeted. So you have this huge 5/5 for 4 that can't be targeted that you can beat up the opponent with. And then when it's about to go away, you can bounce it back to your hand and restart.
That is pretty cool. I have a tangential question for you.
Okay.
Did any of the products not say expert on them? I am noticing that all of them say that.
All of the products that are not core sets say expert on them.
Okay. And do the core sets say beginner, or do they
I
just...
believe they say beginner. We will know when we get to 10th edition later this year.
Okay. Then I guess we'll see.
Okay. Just for Jake, here's some cards. Do you know Sting Scourger already?
I don't. This is brand new to me.
Okay, great. Check it out.
Wow. It's a red bounce spell.
It's a red mana war, kind of.
That's really cool. I don't know why red gets that.
I thought this card was really cool whenever this was new. I like to play it. I usually didn't pay the echo cost and just had like a blocker and annoyed my opponent. But the way that I would end up using this in my future Magic playing career is in Legacy. It's a sideboard card for goblins where if the opponent's playing Omniscience and they're putting in Emrakul, you can put in Sting Scourger and put Emrakul right back in their hand.
That's very cool.
If they put in Omniscience, you lose the game. Because you can't target anything, and then they cast Emrakul, and then you're host. So hopefully they chose
Yeah.
Emrakul. But
The sideboard plan against one of the things they can do,
yeah,
but not the thing that if they have will just then allow them to do the other one.
yeah. King Scourger is one of those cool cards that is really good to bounce back to your hand. So if you can't afford the Echo, maybe you can afford White Mane Lion and do it a second time.
That makes sense. I like his little flail.
I know, it's like a jellyfish.
Yes, it is. All right, these Marauders. We've got a 3/3 for 2
Mm-hmm.
that has Vanishing. And I'll remind myself here, Vanishing is the one. Okay, so Vanishing, it dies when the counter comes off, not when you can't take a counter off.
Right, so this has one attack if you don't give it haste somehow.
But it deals 1 damage to a player
Twice.
or Planeswalker.
Yes, but
Now.
those don't exist yet.
I like the art.
This is popular in Pauper because it's effectively a lava axe for 2. It doesn't always get through to face, but it probably takes out a creature, and it does 2 damage to the opponent. If you combine it with things like Ephemerate or White Mane Lion or things like that, you can get some extra juice out of it. But for the most part, it's just 2 mana for 5 damage, even if 3 of it goes to a creature, is a pretty good rate. And the art is also great. This is one of my favorite cards of the time. I thought it was so cool.
I can also see that. This is a very Bones card. Then we've got a Psychotrope Thallid. Oh, that's a weird card. Well, not weird. It's just, it seems very self-supporting relative to the average card that we're seeing in this time. I know it takes 3 turns for it to make a Saproling.
The constructed Thallids deck, there is a Thallid that gives a spore counter to every fungus on your upkeep, and there's another Thallid that gives all your funguses remove 2 spore counters, make a Saproling. There are ways to make this more efficient in this block and make that 1/1 for 3 body not be quite so disappointing.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I think this is a cool build around. Gets you going, but asks you to do other things to make it really shine.
The closest thing to aristocrats in this block is going to be Saprolings, making a bunch of tokens and different rewards for eating them.
I think this next card is really cool. I love the art. Yeah, I'm drawn to it while we're talking about the Thallid.
The art is fantastic. This is the one that we mentioned briefly last time. We were talking about Thundermare, which is what this is based on. And then you made the connection that that's what Thundermaw Hellkite is based on.
Right.
This is pretty close to Green Lava Axe in practice.
Yes. Very, very close to that, I would say. I mean, if they have removal, I suppose that's not the case, but this is a 4-draw 5/5 haste that taps all their creatures. I think this card is incredibly charming, which is funny because I don't usually like big burn, but there's something about the packaging of it that I like.
Yeah, I thought it was super cool at the time.
That's saying a lot. You hate green cards. So
Well, I didn't always.
interesting. Though to be fair, we could color shift this to red, and then you'd probably like it more.
That's true.
So wait, you didn't hate green cards in 2007?
No, no, I didn't. I didn't for a long time.
Wow.
In fact, whenever we get to Return to Ravnica and Gatecrash, Gruul is my favorite guild.
Wow. I'm really looking forward to the future episode where you tell me this is the card or the set that made me hate green cards.
Well, I don't know that it's any one set, but we'll see.
We're gonna have to check in. I want to know how you feel about green in every set until we reach the point where we figured out what the inflection point is where green became your least favorite color. Maybe every year, not every set. That might get a little bit much.
Cool for cubes. Cards that are from this set that I think are cool for cubes that I don't see in a lot of cubes. Dawn Charm. I don't like playing fogs in my deck, but there are many times where a fog would be convenient to have, and so I think modal fogs are pretty nice. Regenerating a creature, effectively countering removal, is cool. Countering a spell that targets you, if it's like a Mind Rot, can be cool, or a Lava Axe. And then you also have that fog floor if you need it.
Is this card in Time Spell Remastered?
I think so.
One of my local play group was deeply upset when I used this to cast or to block. What is the card? It's like a black suspend card that does something. It has to spend like 8 or something like that, but it does something horrible when it targets you as a player.
I think I know what you're talking about. Is it Curse of the Cabal? Target player sacrifices half the permanents they control rounded down.
That sounds right. And they suspended this and were like, I'm gonna get you. And then I just had this in my hand.
It's pretty good.
And they're really mad. And I was like, come on, man. I've drawn a quarter of my deck since you suspended that card. There's a lot of time to figure out something to do. I have a fondness for this card as a result of that moment.
Just checked. It is not in Time Spell Remastered. It is in Ultimate Masters in Planar Chaos.
I guess there's a different counter target spell that targets you white
Yeah.
in that set. But that is a potent effect sometimes.
How often do you see body double in cubes?
Sometimes is the answer. There was a point where this was in Bodleian Cube, actually.
Oh, wow.
It was a very different cube at that point in time. But I think in my head, this was a sort of blue reanimator piece, which I imagine is historically where this card would have seen play in cubes. But I do think a graveyard clone is very interesting. And I like the idea that you might remove a good creature and then flicker it and enter as a copy of that next creature.
Oh, yeah. That is cool.
You just have a lot more choices most of the time about what this can be. Yeah, I think this card's very cool.
Yeah.
Probably should see it in more cubes, is my take.
That's my thought as well. Okay, I just looked at Time Spell Remastered real quick. I think that what happened may have happened to you and your friend. Phthisis or Phthisis
Yeah, oh, yep.
is the suspend 5 removal spell. Destroy a creature. Its control loses life equal to its power plus its toughness. And then also in the set is Rebuff the Wicked. Counter target spell that targets a permanent you control for white.
Okay, yep, that is exactly what happened
Okay.
right there.
Yeah, that's a pretty good answer. All right, Enslave. Control magic that also pings the owner every turn.
Huh. I am a big control magic hater, so I guess if you want a 6 mana version in black, this is a good choice. But I tend to fall into the camp that says control magic lets control decks just completely not play to the board, which I don't personally find satisfying, but I know there are a lot of people out there who love it.
Mm-hmm.
So they probably would like this.
My favorite thing about this card is that the creature deals damage to its owner. So if you take something like Thieving Magpie, for example, you can get those damage triggers every one of your upkeeps as well.
Okay, that's pretty cool. You can also put it on like a life linker
Mm-hmm.
to just gain a little bit every turn. There's that actually is a very charming angle to the card. I like that a lot.
And Evolution Charm. You Lay of the Land, go get a basic into your hand. Or you can Disentomb, the one you just learned about, Raise Dead. Or you can give a creature flying. So flying was way bigger in Planar Chaos than any other set. And that was part of the color shift. So Uktabi Drake is from this set. I think there's at least one other flyer from this set. And even though what this did in effect was a lot of the time give your creature reach, because it's an instant that gives flying, you can put it on the opponent's turn too. It also gives you that weird evasion that's not typical for green, where you can jump over their stuff.
right? Rather than being trampled, this just says you're flying. That is interesting. I feel like Keldon would like this card.
Why do you say that? Just the vibes.
There's this kind of janky vibe to it. Like I'm envisioning there are cubes where you could make this a really, really exciting card, but it feels like the kind of fiddly thing that a giver cube style cube would make use of.
Very cool. All right. Cube staples from this set. White Mane Lion. Shout out Anthony Maddox.
How could we not?
How could we not? White Mane
This is
Lion.
the original printing.
This is the original printing, and when it was printed, it was even better than it is now, because you could block, put your damage on the stack, ding, count number one, damage on the stack, and then you can put your creature back in your hand, save it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I wonder if they will ever print a throwback to it that somehow emulates damage on the stack. I think that's very cool. I
Yep,
think Why Lane's a sweet card.
love the card.
This next one, less so.
Yeah, this was supposed to be in Blue's color pie, which is why it's not a color shifted card. Blue is supposed to be able to turn creatures into other creatures without outright destroying them. The weird thing is that this is at a very efficient rate, and also that because blue gets access to unsummons, they can kind of get rid of the creature forever, turn it into something else, and then unsummon it in a way that it doesn't ever come back.
Yes, that is true. This card just reads very EDH to me.
It's extremely popular in EDH, so that's very understandable.
When life totals don't matter, 3/3. It's fine. This is basically Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah. Dead Gone. This is the second instance of us seeing red unsummon effects in the set. I believe that the logic for this is that red is short sighted, and so instead of dealing with the problem permanently, it temporarily gets rid of it and doesn't actually address it, which is like a red impulsiveness.
This is kind of a cool spell.
I've seen it in a bunch of cubes. I don't know about you, but I see it all the time.
I don't know that I have, but it's possible I wasn't looking for it. But I think there's something kind of charming about being shock for creatures. And then if you that doesn't do it, you do have the option to say, well, I'll get rid of it for one turn.
Guess how much the foil of this card is?
$12.
$25.
Wow. I guess foil commons from this period of time just did not see the same amount of printing as they do today.
Even the Time Spiral remastered printing of this card is a $4 foil. I'm gonna owe most of that price to Cube. I don't know anywhere else that this is getting played.
You heard it here first. That's Bones' called shot.
I'll have to look it up, see how popular it actually is. I do not think this is getting played in Commander.
I think that's a pretty safe bet, unless it's like a at the risk of ruining the bit that I don't know anything about Commander. This does remove Thassa's Oracle if they're relying on the loyalty
They're
to
not.
win the game.
They're never playing Thoracle unless they have no library at all.
Perfect. The bit is unbesmirched.
And Urborg.
Yeah, I do know this card. I think this card is very cool.
I like that it gives fetch lands activated abilities. If you don't have anything else to get, or if you don't want to pay life, you can just tap them for black.
I think this card's very cool. If you have a lot of Swamp Walk in your cube, I like it way less.
The reason that it's small is because it has a particular synergy with a card in Standard, and it's going to see a lot of play with Tendrils of Corruption.
I can see how this just being, 4+ damage, 4+ life would make it very hard to ever kill you.
There's a really popular deck in this time based on Mystical Teachings, which is the tutor for instant or flash creatures that is an instant and has flashback. And it's a blue-black deck that plays Urborg, and then your islands all become underground seas. And then you can tutor up Tendrils of Corruption whenever a creature is threatening your life total, and gain a bunch of life and remove the threat. And my friend played this in the era, and it was a nightmare for me.
This is pre-Cade, right?
Oh yes, long pre-Cade. This is my friend who I
Okay.
started with, who I traded the Orzhov starter deck to,
Okay.
and plays black
Okay.
control forever.
This does seem like a black control deck.
Yeah, if I didn't have a sack outlet for my goblins and Tendrils resolved, I usually effectively lost the game right then.
You've got them back to your hand.
You can't gone your stuff. You can only gone the opponent's stuff.
Oh, look at that. The fact that it's sideways means that my head's no longer tilted, and thus I can't read it.
Yeah, Sting Scourger
So
is strictly worse than Mana War because you can only target the opponent's stuff. So that was their I guess color pie differentiation between blue unsummons and red ones was red only does the opponent's stuff.
yeah, red's. I did notice that, and I was wondering if there's. Well, it seems like the kind of thing that someone would break pretty quickly, but I don't know how,
Hmm.
but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. My personal favorites. I love this set so much, and I bought a lot of it for me. I bought tournament packs and the fat pack and 2 theme decks, and I just had a total blast. At this time, still, I was not drafting, but I was buying a whole lot of product.
Miri the Cursed is from this set.
Yep. Miri was on the cover of the Unraveling Mind theme deck that I showed you earlier.
Huh. I did not know that. I have played with the Time Spiral Remastered version
Hmm.
of this card in tons of cubes, but I don't think I've ever seen the medium border version.
Yeah. So we've already talked about Rada, who you know. I thought her art was so sick. I was very willing to take 1 point of mana burn if I only had a single red to use on her activate ability, but I always wanted to attack.
Hold on. Mana Burn still exists at this time?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
I think that's the first time that that's come up. So I am
It is.
aware of Mana Burn, right? But I think of that as being like a downside to mana drain kind of thing, not a thing that's kicking around in the late 2000s.
It sure is. Yeah, we're gonna have mana burn for as long as we have damage on the stack.
Okay. I didn't know that. Very cool. That really recontextualizes that card.
Yeah, you have to add if you choose to. You don't have to, but if you had any red, you must add red red. So sometimes I would do it just to play like shock or something, and then I would have to take a point of mana burn.
That makes sense.
Aven Riftwatcher, an all-star for me. Huge fan of this card. I like the Rebels deck a lot. It works really well in the Rescuers deck because if you're about to vanish with it, you bounce it back into your hand and you gain 2 life, and you can replay it and gain 2 life again. It's a Rebel, so it's in the Rebels deck. It works in the red-white deck. Everything I like. 2/3 for 3 flying is like really good stats at this time, being better than Windrake. And if you can get around the vanishing downside, it plays really, really nicely.
Yeah.
Then speaking of the Rebels deck, Blight Speaker is my favorite one. Most of the Rebels are in white, and the one of the best things to get is an aura that's a pacifism that's going to come out in Future Sight, and is a tribal at the time Rebel aura that you can go fetch out and put directly into play on an opponent's creature. In the event that you have got your Blight Speakers out and you don't need to get any more Rebels, or you want to spend your mana on something else, Blight Speaker can always just ping the opponent, and pinging them down 1 point at a time was like my favorite strategy when I wasn't playing red.
This is a super cool card.
I love the art.
I do too. I'm still trying to figure out what's happening in it. I thought it had wings at first, and then I realized the creature didn't have flying. And so those can't be wings. It's like a cloak or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the Rebels deck doesn't really resonate with me because I just didn't play in that time. But the what you're describing here sounds like a really cool play pattern.
Miri is here because, like I said, I had that Unraveling Mind deck. She had nothing to do with the discard theme. She's just a very cool, strong black card. One time, playing casually with my friend, I was dead on board, but my opponent was at 3 life, and I'm playing black. I don't think I had Fiery Tempers left, and so the only way I could win is if I top decked exactly Miri because they didn't have any flying or reach, but I couldn't get through on the ground. So I had to top deck Miri, and so I knocked the top of the deck and I said, "Miri, I need you." Flip the top card. It's Miri. Instant win. The crowd goes wild. Huge fan.
You'd love a good called shot top deck.
Lifelong bond with Miri the Cursed.
It's actually really pushed a lot of what we're looking at here still, which I think is why I didn't think it was this old.
Makes sense.
Maybe I'm just wrong and it's less pushed than I think it is, but 3 power flying first strike haste for 4 just seems really potent.
Lore question. Her flavor text references a hero fails, a martyr falls, destinies interchange. Who is her destiny interchanged with?
I have no idea.
Do you know who Krovax is?
I've heard of Grovex.
So Krovax was a human noble that was part of the Weatherlight crew, which is what Gerard and Miri are also part of. Sisay is the captain of the Weatherlight. Gerard's the hero. Miri was Gerard's best friend. Krovax was a noble who joined them, and he had a guardian angel named Selenia. And whenever the guardian angel dies, she transfers a curse to the person who kills her, and it was Krovax. So Krovax becomes a vampire back in Stronghold, and then he eventually becomes the Evankar of Wrath, and he gets a card called Ascendant Evankar. Do you know anything about that card?
Nope.
Okay, it's from Nemesis, and it's a little shield red. It gives black creatures +1/+1 besides itself, and it gives all non-black creatures -1/-1. Oh, I'm sorry, it's a mini Elish Norn, not a shield red. In Planar Chaos, instead, Miri kills the angel, and so Miri gets the vampire curse instead of Krovax. And we get a white version of Krovax, which is Krovax Ascendant Hero, and he gives other white creatures +1 and non-white creatures -1/-1. And I think that's actually the prototype of Elish Norn.
That is really cool. I have seen that Crovax card before, and that's a cool bit of lore. There's only one set in the entire set of these where I will know the story.
Then I will try to drop as much as I can. And here's a Chroma. So the original Chroma had 7 abilities. It was just the kitchen sink, every mechanic we can throw on. And then they, for whatever reason, decided let's have a red Achroma, and let's give her 7 abilities. Her abilities are a little bit less straightforward. The fact that white Achroma gets haste and red Achroma does not get haste has always bothered me.
I absolutely see that. That is super weird.
That being said, I did love playing this dumb, very slow card in my decks against my other friend, Matt, who started playing around this time and was a blue-white control player.
Because you'd morph it and then flip it.
Yeah, or if I top decked it late, I could cast it and he couldn't counter it. And then he also couldn't target it with any white removal. My early play group, my 2 friends were playing black control and white blue control, and I was trying to get through with goblins.
Is this why you hate control?
It's a miracle that I stuck with the game.
Yeah, this is teaching me a lot about your perspective on control as a player.
Also, her feathers are like hawk wings, and I think that's so cool.
Yeah, that is really interesting. They've got like a hand vibe to them almost at the end.
Mm-hmm. Those are my personal favorites. There are so many because I love the set so much.
Yeah, this seems cool.
Fun facts. Read Heroes Remembered.
Oh, I've seen this card.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is also reprinted in Time Spiral Remaster. Maybe I'm wrong, but
You're wrong.
this card.
This is the only printing.
So this is really interesting. So one of my friend's older brothers had played Magic growing up, and so did he. He was the one who convinced us to play Magic in the first place. So he had some of his brother's old cards, and so it must be this was the case. But he desperately wanted this card to work, and even in super janky kitchen table Magic, I don't think I ever saw him gain 20 life of this card. He,
Oh, wow.
maybe in like a janky 4-player free for all with kitchen table decks, he managed to do it, but he really wanted to do this with Veto Thorn of the Dusk Rose to
Oh,
one shot
wow.
someone.
That's so funny.
That was his dream.
A dream never realized. Okay, Chronozoa. Have you seen this one before?
I think yes.
This was cool around the time. I don't think it made any constructed impact. But Cade, many years later when I met Cade, would play a version of this with Solemnity.
Did that just give you infinite Chronozoas?
If you have a way to sacrifice them, yes.
Chronozoa, Goblin Bombardment, Solemnity. I'm here for it. Now you probably use what, like Ashnod's Altar or something like that?
I may have been Altar of Dementia.
Dementia?
I can't remember what was in Modern at the time. This was a Modern deck, and Goblin Bombardment was not in Modern.
Ah,
Okay, do you know the top card here, Morphling?
I do.
Was called Superman back in the day. Famously powerful constructed card in its day. Torchling here has never had any constructed impact at all. Its entire presence on MTG Top 8 is in one limited deck from some big event. Somebody opened it in limited and played it there. That's the only time anyone has ever played Torchling.
Huh.
Despite the fact that the first ability and the last 2 abilities are identical to Morphling.
Yeah, not being able to protect itself is certainly. Well, I guess
It does protect
you
itself.
need another
It
target.
just doesn't
Well,
have flying.
kind. Like you can't run out of things. I see that point though. No evasion.
No evasion. So here's my thing. I wonder if that second ability was target creature can't block Torchling this turn. If it would have been a different story.
That does seem like a big upside.
In a few years, we're going to get Aetherling, which was extremely powerful, mostly because it could become unblockable.
I am familiar with Aetherling. The card is messed up.
And yeah, I feel like Torchling kind of is sad because it is an echo of such an iconic and powerful card, and I think it has pretty great art. It's got like 3 identical abilities. Damage still uses the stack, which is something that was so powerful about Morphling, is that you can make its power really high, assign high damage, and then dump all your mana into making its toughness really high.
Very fascinating. I think this card is cool.
And then Kavu Predator. 2/2 trample. When an opponent gets life, you get that many counters. No inherent way to give the opponent life. No even obvious way to give the opponent life. This reads just like a sideboard card. But it's weird for a sideboard card in green to punish probably white. What this card got played with in standard is Fiery Justice up there off the time shifted sheet.
Wow, that's sick. You feel like a real idiot if you suspend Heroes Remembered and then they just slam this on counter.
Yep. I didn't even think
I
about interaction whenever I put these two on the same slide.
For whatever reason, I see this card and I just think of, one of my favorite situations in Magic to have it occasionally happen is when both creatures have a Zulaport Cutthroat.
Yeah,
Or sorry, but not both creatures, but
both
both
players.
players do,
Mm-hmm.
which frequently doesn't really matter, right? And all the creatures that trade just cancel each other out. But in this case, it actually just gains power equal to the number of the opponent creatures that die, even though life totals don't change. Now, again, that seems incredibly strange that would come up, but it's what I thought of when I saw it.
Yeah, and at the floor, it's a 2/2 trample for 2. It's better than Grizzly Bears.
Yeah.
Some opponents are going to gain life some amount of the time, and if you throw like auras or equipment onto this, it just has trample. It's a charging badger. It's just like a little pump me up, give me something good. But I think because of the trigger, people often think, oh, that's a sideboard card, I'm not going to play it, even though it's better than a lot of other 2/2s on rate at this time. Moving on to Future Sight, the final set of this block. A fantastic set, really just delivers on all the promise of what the rest of the block has set up. We get a lot of the payoffs for Suspend and other time counter effects at this time. We get a bunch of really good Rebels, which is why the theme deck here, Rebels Unite, finally gets put together, because this is where we get our pacifism. This is where we get a bunch of the good Rebel tutor effects and the Rebels to be tutored. And also, there are 37 total keywords in this set.
37. Wow.
Because of what I'm about to show you, future shifted sheet, they did a bunch of one-off mechanics that were potential future mechanics, and keywording them was part of the bit, because you never know if this is a keyword that's actually going to appear in the future or something that just shows up one time, never to be used again. The themes were Suspend, Thalids, Slivers, Rebels. Planeswalkers were supposed to appear here, but they needed a little bit more time, so they get pushed off to the fall set. And then for the very first time, this might surprise you, we have the tribal card type. Shroud is keyworded, Reach is keyworded, and Lifelink and Death Touch are both keyworded for the first time in this set.
Wow. So we get 3 evergreen keywords and 1 keyword that should be evergreen instead of hexproof.
And when they were keyworded, Lifelink and Death Touch were both triggered abilities.
They're triggered abilities.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They will remain triggered abilities until M10.
Okay. Yeah, that's a lot of information that I didn't know was the case. I would have guessed that those were keyworded way before this.
Yeah. So, in their deep exploration of the potential future of Magic, they actually did hit a pretty good number of things that would stick around for real. So, here's the future shifted frame. It was 81 cards that could be printed in the near future, some of which would be paid off immediately, many of which were making weird references that would occasionally be paid off, occasionally not. And unlike the previous 2 booster pack cards that had a specific slot in the pack, because they designed so many of these, there were between 5 and 10 in every pack.
Wow.
Gold Meadow Lookout there is referencing Lorwyn that does not exist yet. So Kithkins exist and have existed for a long time in Magic, but they didn't really look like that. And then as soon as Lorwyn comes out, this fits right in. So this is predicting the extremely near future. This is the first appearance of Gravestorm, and the only appearance of Gravestorm for a long, long time. Ghostfire is the first appearance of Ugin.
Is this the first Devoid card?
It is a Devoid card, kind of, and it's the first reference to Ugin ever. Ugin has no lore meaning or anything here. They just made up a word. That flavor text was the entire lore for Ugin whenever they made it up, and they just ran with it in cons later.
This is so much cooler than Ghostfire Slice, which I now recognize is decidedly a reference to this card.
Yep.
But this is just way cooler.
We used to play this to answer protection from red creatures in Burn.
That makes sense. And Merganda's not a plane yet, right? Or it's not a plane we've been to, right?
No, we've never gone to Muraganda until Aetherdrift.
But this is what sets it up as the vanilla plane.
Exactly, yeah. I do not know how many other references existed to Muraganda at this time. This might be the first. But we never went to Muraganda until Aetherdrift, and that's why it has the Vanilla Matters thing.
Very cool.
Also, creature tokens are not really popular at this time. Obviously, Gold Medal Lookout there is making a token and is part of a cycle of cards that make tokens, which I will reference later. Just making vanilla tokens is not like an every set thing. It's about to be a big thing once we get to Lorwyn and 10th edition, but at this time, it's not all the time. But it was very good with Sapperlings.
Yeah, tokens are powerful.
Just for Jake, what do you know about Bridge from Below?
That every time I read it, it immediately I just lose what it does.
So, this is an enchantment that has a cost, but really shouldn't, because it does nothing on the battlefield. It has to be in your graveyard to work, and when one of your opponent's creatures dies, it gets exiled from your graveyard. On the battlefield, it does nothing at all.
Right. And so you're discarding it, and then you want your creatures to die
Mm-hmm.
to get a bunch of zombies.
Yep, good with Hogak.
Yeah, I love Tombstalker. A very, very, very cool card.
That feels like your kind of card. Maybe because it's like a black Murktide Regent. Maybe because I think of it as a black Murktide Regent, which is why I associate that card and that color with you.
That's interesting. I mean, I like blue. I really like Murktide Regent. I think this card, yeah, is just very cool. I like this frame for it a lot, and it's the first Delve card that we get, which is also I love Delve as a mechanic. I know it's a controversial, problematic one, but yeah, this is sweet.
In this same set, we get two other Delve cards, Death Rattle and Logic Knot.
I am familiar with Logic Knot. I am not familiar with Death Rattle.
Death Rattle is Murderous Cut, but the creature can't be regenerated, and it can only target non-green creatures.
Interesting.
And it costs one more mana. It's black and 5. So that's why you haven't heard of it, because Murderous Cut is just better.
Yeah, that's fair. I think I've heard of Utopia Mycon before.
It's popular in Commander, because you can convert all your Sapperlings to mana.
Interesting. Okay.
Yet another member of the Thalids deck.
Nimbus. Does this cycle exist?
No. The Future Sight cycle of lands here are 5 ally colored lands that all do something different.
I was only aware of Horizon Canopy going into this discussion.
Excellent. This is my favorite of the cycle, and one of my favorite land designs ever. If you have a blue, it gives you access to white. If you have a white, it gives you access to blue. If you have both, you get both. And it has a regular mana ability for whenever you don't.
This is so much cooler than a Verge.
I
Like,
know. I
what were
know.
they thinking?
Whenever Verges came out, I was like, why did you do that? You had Nimbus Maze. Just finish Nimbus Maze.
Upsides of this over Verges. One, none of them are yellow around the border, which is sick. Two, you know exactly what kind of mana this taps for. And in a two-color deck, this is always a dual land. Right? There's just no way you're keeping a hand that doesn't have any other mana sources besides this one. That's a sick design.
I love it. I think it is so cool.
And you don't have to remember what the base color is.
Yeah. You're less of a stickler than me about having mismatched mana cycles. So if you were ever looking for cool white blue lands for cube, I think this is a really cool one.
Yet I am a huge proponent of breaking cycles. I don't think for my main cube that this beats Celestial Colonnade in terms of my flex slot, but yeah, this is a sweet land. I now think the Verges are even dumber.
Cool for cubes. Marshalling Cry. I like this card so much. You can pump your team, give them all vigilance, and swing. I am a notorious hater of trumpet blast effects in cube and like instant pumps that modify combat. I know that that is like a tenet, especially of Pauper Cube design, but I much prefer them to be sorceries. And this one is especially cool because if you don't have a board to pump, you can cycle it, but you get like a backup version in your graveyard for later.
Flashing Mirror 4 seems so reasonable in this. Like, I have to imagine a good chunk of the time you want card plus 4 drop instead of 3 drop.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the fact that you can do it in back-to-back turns if you have a full board, like okay, swing my big team. You're probably gonna lose in combat because I have temporary bonuses, and then you get to just back it up and do it again the second time. Big fan of this card.
Wow, this just makes your creatures unblockable.
Once per turn, yes. But the cool thing is the reason that Shadow is so much better than flying, and just a cool mechanic in general. You can target your opponent's creatures and make them unable to block, or target your creatures and make them unblockable, whichever one is more advantageous.
Making your opponent's creatures unable to block with this is pretty interesting from a game design perspective, I don't know how I feel about that being persistent. Mostly just because you can't interact with this in your opponent's hand. It's probably not problematic on rate, but I could see it being frustrating to be trying to play blockers in a deck that can't get this out of their opponent's hand.
I think that in play pattern perspective though, it's going to be pretty similar to a tapper. When you're like the other white mechanic is just having a creature that can tap other creatures, where they turn off your best blocker every turn.
I was thinking that too, but a tapper that you need to Inquisition of Kozilek out of their hand is very different than a tapper that you can remove.
You're completely right. I think that it plays quite interestingly, but I agree, could be frustrating.
I think it's got to be the right cube for it. There are cubes where that's totally within expectations for what's going on, but I also could see that being deeply frustrating.
Do you see delay very often?
Yeah. So I first saw this card at CubeCon last year in our friend Greg's Atomic Cube,
Oh,
and it brutalized me because it hit my Croxa that I escaped,
oh,
which really sucked
yeah, I bet it did.
because I had enough cards to escape it more than once, but it was just gone.
Oh no.
But I actually think it's a really cool design. That did not make me think that it was an unfun card. I think it's pretty unique. It actually feels a bit more white to me than blue on a vibe basis, but
Yeah, I can see that.
I think it's very cool. And I think more people should play
Do you see
Hypocrisy.
Apocryphite in cubes ever?
Let's see. No, but that's interesting.
So if you use Unearth on it, if you bring it back in any way, if you ephemerate it, if you flicker it, anytime it comes into
Yeah.
play, not from your hand, it's a
Yeah, I was
4/4.
thinking that Odzolith plus flicker effects would get pretty ridiculous.
Sick.
Yeah, that's a cool card.
Yeah, and every time it dies, you get it again in the future, and it always has haste when it comes in off suspend. So 4/4 swinging. I think this card's so cool.
I agree. That is a very cool design, but I've never seen it before.
Cube Staples. Pact of Negation. There is a whole Pact cycle in this set, but I think Pact of Negation is probably the most well known.
I think that's definitely true. It's Pact of Negation, then it's the Murder one,
Slaughter Pact.
and then it's like, so the red one makes like a 4/1 haste or something, and then you like lose the game.
No, it is a 4/4. Period. It is a Pact of the Titan. It does not have haste. You have to pay 4 in a red next turn or lose the game.
Yeah, exactly. So that one I see why it's not there. I think that the white one's some kind of Teferi's protection-esque card, right?
It's pretty bad.
And I don't know what the green one does.
It's Intervention Pact. The next time a source of your choice would deal damage to you this turn, prevent that damage, and you gain life equal to the damage prevented. But you should know Summoner's Pact, the green one. This is a constructed staple, which is why you don't know it. But this is a card that would go get Primeval Titan, and for 0, get a green creature card put in your hand. Usually you'd win the game right then, Titan Shift decks. But if you don't win the game right then, this is the whole reason that delayed triggers make you lose the game rules exist, is because Summoner's Pact was so prevalent, it came up all the time at PPTQs, which would later become RCQs. Because the way that the rules used to work, if you go to your upkeep and you draw and you don't acknowledge a Summoner's Pact trigger, you just lose. You've immediately lost. The opponent can scoop up their stuff. And then the rules changed to give the opponent the ability to put the trigger on the stack. The modern thing that happens with these pacts is you let your opponent cast a spell or something if they forget and you're not being extra nice to them at the RCQ. You let them like put a spell on the stack and then they're tapped out, and then in response you call a judge and say he missed his Pact of Negation trigger. I'd like to put it on the stack now.
Huh. Well, that kind of sucks.
Isn't that bizarre?
That is bizarre. I actually think these cards are deeply cool, though. I think I'm known for not liking free counter spells,
Mm-hmm.
but I think Pact of Negation feels so different in that respect to me. I think having to be able to pay 5 mana on your next upkeep just feels like such a greater cost to me than any of the other free counter spells that are commonly cubed. I know there's the one where you have to like discard like 2 islands and another card. Like I will give you that is a usually a greater cost than this, but knowing that it's not on until we're in the late game feels so much more fair to me. And that you're getting their turn, which at the point where 5 mana is in play, getting their next turn is so much more than getting a card from their hand.
Yeah, it's true.
But I also think it's cool that you can counter a spell and just try to win.
I also love that the mana cost is the cost of Force of Will.
That is really elegant.
Okay, Vincer.
Yeah, I mean, what is there to say about this card?
Shout out Trainmaster GT.
Number one hater of this card. I feel like everybody else likes this card. I think people don't love that it can bounce lands, but it's coming back.
The most effective time I used it recently, I was playing a mono blue deck in a bug cube, in a Sultai cube,
Hmm.
and I was on the play and ended up playing Vincer at the opponent's end step, bouncing a land to their hand, attacking with Vincer and ninjutsuing it for 1 mana, and then I played a land, and then I played Vincer and put a land back in their hand again. And then the next turn, I had a 2 mana ninjutsu, so I did it again. Played a 6th land, used 2 mana to ninjutsu Vincer again, play Vincer again, and put the land back in their hand. And they like never got to their 4th mana, I think, when I was at 6.
Yeah, that is absolutely brutal. But it's one of those things where it's like you had to work really hard to do that.
And they had no board at all, to be clear. They were trying to develop a board, and I stopped them from developing a board.
Yeah, I think that that's the kind of edge case which folks might not like, but I think this card is so cool that it's worth it. I mean, I ran this in Bodleian Cube until 2025. We recently had a bunch of very powerful 4 drops that I think are very cool come out in blue that ultimately took its space, but it's just really effective. Returning a spell or permanent to its owner's hand, flash, this does a lot of cool stuff. It's a super elegant design. I adore this card. Like, have I, vindicated my opponent's second land drop and then ventured their third land drop before in one of my friends' games? Absolutely. But I don't think that that's the routine use case for this. The only time I don't like Venser is if you have Soul Herder in your cube. I think that that is heinous. But that is Soul Herder's problem and not Venser's problem. Speaking of heinous cards, though, this next one.
Yeah, Sprout Swarm. I'm just gonna shout out. I would love an old border printing of Vincer sometime.
I'm really surprised we don't have that because we have the foil etched printing, but we don't have the old border printing. It feels very old border too.
Okay, Sprout Swarm.
Yeah, Sprout Swarm is a card. I know this card because when we did the most hated cube card voting, I think in 2023, the Pauper Cube folks came out in force to talk about how miserable this card is.
That's funny.
This card looks like it sucks to me. And by sucks, I mean the play pattern, not the rate.
When they were working on Time Spiral Remastered, this is such an iconic part of Time Spiral Block Draft because it was a Future Sight common that they were like, well, we have to put it back in the set. It was so iconic for the original draft. And they tested it at every rarity up to Mythic and decided that it was too damaging to the play pattern of draft to put it in Time Spiral Remastered at all.
I think that's incredibly telling. And if you curate a cube with this in it, maybe that's food for thought.
Okay, land that you referenced earlier, Horizon Canopy, the only one of the cycle that you
Yeah.
knew.
Yeah, and another cycle that they, for some reason, have elected not to finish.
Masterful trolling to go the other direction and print a whole cycle of 5 enemy color cards instead of finishing the one they started in ally color.
That's true. I still think that's a baffling choice to just not print all 10 of them. I know they're reasonably powerful cards, but I would love to see them get printed somewhere. I'm not going to sit here saying, these definitely wouldn't be problematic in standard, but I don't know. These are just really good designs
I guess we have to wait for MH4.
where they reprint fetch lands again instead of maybe an MH4, but frankly, this is just a card with a great play pattern, and they need to print them. My hot take is that I would take these over the other bicycle lands 100 times out of 100.
I can't agree with that because I need them so badly for my desert cubes. However, I think that more cubes will be benefited by finishing this canopy cycle.
I think that that's true, and I'll admit my extreme bias in that I just want the Rakdos one of these in particular.
Oh,
But I
well,
also
yeah,
think the
that makes sense.
Gruul one is so synergistic with what Gruul wants to do in so many spaces. I think the allied colors just are more set up to take advantage of these effects as a whole than the enemy colors are.
Personal favorites. So here's Bound in Silence that I referenced earlier. A pacifism that you can tutor straight into play, meaning it doesn't target. So you can put it on shroud creatures, You can't put it on protection from white creatures or protection from enchantment creatures, but you can put it on creatures that you normally couldn't target, like Shroud, Hexproof, that kind of thing.
Super cool.
Big fan of that card.
Love this art too.
Yeah, very cool art. This would be reprinted because the Rebels theme appears in Modern Masters, the first one, and Time Spiral Remastered, at Common. And I think that that is telling, that it was so good for the draft that they downshifted it from Uncommon.
That checks out.
This next card is probably pronounced Iker Slick, but I have always pronounced it Iker Slick, and it's so much more fun to say.
Yes, this card I am familiar with. I think this is a Cube Designer favorite.
Probably true. Yeah.
like I, I think it's a cool card, but I think Cube Designers probably like this more than anybody else.
Yeah. 3 mana sorcery removal or 6 mana instant removal with draw a card.
I prefer Edge of Autumn myself, which is gorgeous art and just has so many cool edge cases to it.
Real big fan of Edge of Autumn.
I'm actually, as you know, putting this into Bodleian Cube in the next update,
Yeah, right
which
now.
I haven't publicly posted. So maybe people will find that out in this video before I do that. I think it's really cool to let the ramping decks cash out their ramp card and a land for another card, which is a bad rate early, but is a great rate later. I've actually been considering if this would be interesting in a cube I have that I use. It also has, the cube essentially breaks out into 5 monocolor starter decks, and then you can shuffle them together with some gold cards and lands to draft. I've been wondering if this card would be appropriate there. It's a little bit complicated, but I really like that it subtly teaches you this lesson about the value of extra lands and ramp spells early versus late in the
Mm-hmm.
game. This last one, though, this is beautiful art. I'm a little confused by it.
The reason I think this one is so cool is that it's blue when it's not your turn, and it's blue during your turn if you haven't played a land yet, which you could do, if you sequence properly. It's
Mhm.
blue or black. But on your opponent's turn, it's always blue. That's really cool because that's when you usually need counter magic. When Lorwyn comes out and Fairies gets popular, this is really cool because if it's your land play, you can Thoughtseize, or you can pass and hold up Spell Snare with the same land.
Okay, that is really cool. But I do think that that works so much better with blue as the base color than anything else.
I agree. I do not want this to be a full cycle. I think this is a perfectly good individual weird cycle. I think it is still better than the Verges.
But it would be cool if it was a broken cycle. Blue red and blue white versions of this would also be cool.
Mm-hmm. Like the Tainted cycle from Torment.
Yes, that are all black. Yeah, I agree. This is also cooler than Verges. I'm surprised it's not standard play though. Well, I guess you only have shocks were in the standard too, right? Because of Ravnica that we were just on.
Yeah,
But I
that was
guess
the last set.
you're
They have to
running
be.
more than just 4 of those. So that's cool that it's not standard play in that format.
So that is the third member of this cycle that we've shown. There are 2 others that are not going to be in the slideshow. Do you know what they are?
Oh, is red green Grove of the Burnwells?
Sure is.
Okay.
And black red. It's going to be really funny if you don't know the black red one.
I don't.
Graven Cairns.
I do know that that is a magic card because for a reason I'll talk about it some future episode. I recently was looking at the name of all the black red lands,
Mm-hmm.
but I have no idea what Graven Cairns does, despite having just seen it on Scryfall a couple of days ago.
That is the black red filter land.
Oh, ugh.
That would be reprinted in Shadowmoor.
Filter lands suck. I'm gonna go on record and say that. I'll say it again if we get to Shadowmoor.
Wow. Brutal.
Am I thinking of the right one? Is this the one that's colorless, but you filter like one of the colors into 2 of either of the colors?
Yes. Black or red in to get out black, 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 red, or red, red. It's strictly better than the Odyssey ones.
I get you. I also they're so fiddly, and I really do not appreciate that. Like in the exact way that Edge of Autumn is interesting and I think teaches like something about the game. I feel like if I handed that to someone who had never played with them before, they would be like, why is this a part of the game? I don't know. I think that that's I just don't want to think about that when I'm playing Magic. I think there's so many cool decisions I'm making in Magic. Like breaking out my land abacus to figure out what's going on with those is not something I want to do.
All right. Especially in multiples, they can be kind of ridiculous to parse your mana through.
Yeah, not as bad as the thriving lands, in multiples where you just look and you're like, I better believe my opponent when they say they can tap for these colors because there's no indication on the board whatsoever that that's the case. But filter lands are a close second to me.
Fun facts. This set could have 1 million fun facts.
8-0. I love that so much.
I'm glad. I actually said the same thing regarding fun facts about Time Spiral, and I'm just going to reiterate it here. Future Sight is an insane set. It has so many crazy stories. Steam Flogger Boss, when printed, I believe was the only rigger, and assembling contraptions had no meaning. It was never intended to ever have meaning. It was just supposed to be a joke and do nothing. And then the community found out that it was supposed to be a joke and do nothing. And they were like, but theoretically, what would they do? And they haunted Mark Rosewater until he made Unstable.
That is quite a story.
Read Spellweaver Volute.
Enchant instant card in a graveyard. Whenever you play a sorcery spell, copy the enchant this card. That's so cool. Why have I never seen this card before?
Because it's insane. The enchantment is on the battlefield. It is enchanting a card in a graveyard. If the enchanted card in the graveyard goes away, you have to sacrifice the enchantment. If somebody exiles it, for example. But it's on the battlefield, the card's in the graveyard, and they are like bonded by the rules of the game in this weird, bizarre way.
This is a nightmare, but it's cool.
It only works on instants, and it only works when you play sorceries. But you can enchant instants in your opponent's graveyard and play them with your sorceries. It's so crazy.
That's so cool. I also think this is one of those cards that I'm sure is really complicated in the rules, but if you just hand it to a new player, they're gonna be like, sick. Like this lets me cast instants out of the graveyard when I cast sorceries, and then I pick the next one. Like the actual way in which that's accomplished in the rules of the game is really complicated, but aesthetically it's very simple.
Fortifications.
I've never heard of a fortification before in the context of Magic.
It's equipment for lands.
That's interesting. I really don't know how I feel about that. It strikes me that there's probably a reason that this has never come back. I think attaching things to lands is not great.
It has technically come back one time in a Fallout card, but it has never come back in regular Magic.
If you're playing exclusively a format where you don't read any of your opponent's cards, then them attaching things to the lands is no downside. But otherwise, kind of hard. I just think it's really hard to see what's underneath people's lands.
Yeah.
Very low on things that attach to them. This is interesting though. Like conceptually, it's interesting. The idea of just like slamming a wall into place on the land for 3 mana is like pretty funny to me. Like a little bit less ludo narrative than picking up a sword, given the amount of time that takes. But I see what they're going for.
Okay. Force of Savagery.
I mean, give me one persist combo enabler, and this card is sick. Just something that puts a +1/+1 counter on it when it enters, or it makes it enter with a 1/1 counter. We got like good Fortune Unicorn, and we just play this, and now we have a 3 mana 9/1 trample.
So, speaking of, this card would not be very useful the moment it releases. But later this year, it's about to be very useful because of Lorwyn.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah, just a neat little package, couple sets apart.
Yeah, that's super cool. I love it. I also love the art on Soulstroke.
I know. I'm just
That's
gonna gush about the
incredible.
Lorwyn art the whole time that we're there. Okay, we have made it through Future Sight and all of Time Spiral Block.
Okay.
So now it's time for a word from our time traveling sponsors before the final two sets of the year. The first time traveling sponsor from 2007 is iPhone. You won't know it when you get one, but the world is now different forever. You can watch next year's economic excitement from anywhere. You won't be able to look away. You're welcome, and also, we're sorry. The first iPhone is announced in 2007.
I remember.
And our other sponsor, Blockbuster Total Access. It's Blockbuster. You all love Blockbuster. Please don't use Netflix. You can rent our HD DVDs through the mail. Please. We have I Am Legend.
HD DVDs are the third sponsor of this format for the real ones that remember that this was a competitor to Blu-ray at one point.
You know when that point was? 2007.
2007.
They lost this battle in 2008.
Yeah, there's 2 dead Titans on this page and 1 current Titan.
Yeah, there sure is. Okay. 10th edition. Bam, bam, bam,
It doesn't
bam.
say beginner.
It
So
does
is
not
there's
say
there's
beginner
regular.
on it. I believe I misled you, and that this is the point at which they give up the beginner and advanced marketing. Future Sight was probably the last time they did it. If you can see there at the very bottom, age 13 plus, I think that's all they're going to go with from now on.
Yep.
What can you tell me about 10th edition?
That it isn't M10. You learned that last time.
Certainly not.
10th edition is the last core set for a while,
This is
right?
the last core set for a while. This is also the last core set in the original run of core sets. M10 does something completely different in a couple of ways, which we'll cover when we get there. But this is the last of the true core sets, which are all reprints. All reprints used to mean white borders to indicate the reprintedness. 10th edition breaks that streak. They have an ad where they describe it as back in black, all black border reprints for the first time in a core set.
I mean, that is a fantastic positive for the game. So shout out to 10th edition.
It does a number of very good things for the game. It is an enormous set of 383 cards. This is the first core set with legendary creatures in the set. This is the first core set with tokens in the booster packs. It is also the first core set with keyworded Defender, Double Strike, Flash, Lifelink, Reach, and Shroud.
Wow.
So many of the things that we consider super core
That's
to the
most of
game's
the main
identity,
keywords.
yeah, are here for the first time, alongside black borders, legendary creatures. A lot of the things that they try to sell the game to beginners around now were done here for the first time.
All right. Well, let's dive into it.
Given that it's a core set, I'm only going to have 3 cards per slide because it is all reprints. But I'm going to call out cards that I think you like regardless. Great fact, who doesn't love sacrificing your things to Yawgmoth, making the opponent sacrifice something too?
Yeah, I'm sure Great Pact and Yawgmoth are often played in the same deck.
BFFs.
I guess in Commander that could be true. Who knows? I couldn't say.
Yes, this is a popular commander card.
So these next two cards I love. Nantuko Husk, I think, is the coolest. There's a lot of cards that do exactly this for 2 and a black, but I think Nantuko Husk is the coolest of them.
Husk is an icon.
And then Threaten is it's just a special card. I really like Threatens. I think we talked about that last time. How Captivating Crew was
Mm-hmm.
one of the most potent kitchen
We sure
table
did.
cards that I had, and Claim the Firstborn as well.
Cool for cubes. Here is the Ascendant Evan that I referenced earlier. That's Krovax, whenever he becomes the Evan of Wrath. And look at the flavor text.
Mhm.
That's exactly what happened to Miri in Planar Chaos.
Yeah. 3 mana, just mill 3.
Ambassador Laquatus is so cool. Most cool, especially though, is this art. He was first printed in Torment, and his art in Torment is significantly worse than this cool art here.
Okay.
And finally, Mortivore. I thought this card was unbeatable whenever I was a kitchen table player.
Right. This looks like an unbeatable kitchen table card.
And it beat my goblins up many, 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 many times.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not a regenerate fan.
Also, some of the best ways to kill creatures that could regenerate were effects like Terror, which can't target it. So, I was really up a creek as
Yeah,
far as this card.
that's fair.
I should have threatened it, honestly. Cube staples. Troll Ascetic is extremely popular in this time for standard. And I think that as a result, it's popular in cubes that were made by people who are familiar with this time and constructed.
That makes sense.
This would be one of the first cards to receive the hexproof keyword whenever we get the hexproof keyword.
Right. We've got Proto Thrun.
Mm-hmm. There is Warhammer with the triggered ability spelled out in the reminder text.
Oh, that is cool.
At this time, you can attach multiple Warhammers to the same creature, and you will gain multiple instances of life.
Oh, because the triggered ability.
Because triggered ability. Yeah.
Just like how Prowess works. That's cool.
Treetop Village is just classic, amazing, sick land.
Absolutely. And I will shout out, while I don't like Regenerate, I actually do think it's a really good representation of Dungeons and Dragons trolls.
Yeah.
Which is very clearly what they were going for here.
Okay, personal favorites. Sunken Hope. The opponent starts bouncing their creatures first. And because this is in your deck, you probably want to bounce your creatures for some reason. Maybe they have Vanishing. Maybe you have ETBs. Maybe you're playing Maelstrom Wanderer like me and you want to cascade every turn. Sunken Hope, really cool enchantment.
Yes. I've never seen this card before. I love the art.
The art in 10th edition is really good.
Is that guy just becoming water? That's what's happening?
Yep. Looks like it.
That's terrifying. I love that.
Doom Necromancer. I just like this card. I think it's cool. I also like that it's a mercenary. I at some point made my own little dual decks, Rebels versus Mercenaries, because I was a huge fan of the Rebels deck, obviously. This being a mercenary is relevant and is one of the best mercenaries because most mercenaries are quite bad.
I didn't know mercenaries existed this far back in the game, but I think this is a very cool card.
Mercenaries first appeared in Mercadian Masks alongside Rebels, and that was some of the factioning of Mercadian Masks was Rebels versus Mercenaries.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Mercenaries chain down. They activate the ability to go get a cheaper mercenary out of your deck, and Rebels chain up, so they are just inherently better, and therefore that's the only mechanic that made its return in Time Spiral.
That makes sense.
And then Squee, some of my favorite art, one of my favorite little guys.
Squeeze great.
Fun facts about the set. Do you recognize what's happening in that time stop there? Why it doesn't have reminder text?
Why it doesn't have reminder text? No.
So the foils in 10th edition do not have reminder text, and in the case of 36 cards, have added secret bonus flavor text that doesn't fit on the card whenever they add reminder text. So the foils in 10th edition are highly sought after, and that time stop is $75.
Wow. That is a pretty iconic printing.
Prodigal Pyromancer there is a reference to Prodigal Sorcerer, whose nickname is Tim, because he was kind of like Tim the Enchanter from Monty Python. That effect was in blue for years and years and years and years. And then we got Planar Chaos, where they color shifted it to red. And believe it or not, red is kind of where this effect belongs. So 10th edition then canonized that by putting it in red in a normal printing for the first time.
Cool. That's awesome.
Scion of the Wild, 10th edition rare, as big as all your creatures. Modern Masters 2 common, as big as all your creatures.
That's pretty funny.
Pretty good downshift. And I told you earlier that there were a cycle of spell shapers in Future Sight that made token copies of cards. And the one that I showed you made token copies of Gold Meadow Harrier, which is going to appear in the next set, Lorwyn. Well, the other 4 members of that cycle created Cloud Sprite, Festering Goblins, Spark Elementals, and Llanowar Elves, all of which appear in 10th edition.
Very cool.
Yeah, just a weird little 2007 super cycle of a Future Sight cycle that makes tokens that are creatures that appear in the next set, except for one which appears 2 sets later.
Gotta keep people guessing.
Yep. Speaking of the next set, we're going to have what's called the Grand Creature Type Update. A bunch of creatures are going to go back and have their creature types updated for the first time. Many of them getting logical updates, things that are obviously human, having the human creature type added on old cards before they added the human creature type. And one of those cards is going to be Phage the Untouchable. So she gets a printing here in 10th edition as a minion. After the Grand Creature Type update, at some point, she's going to have the creature type Zombie added. And then, when they reprint her in Conspiracy, years later, she's going to be printed as an Avatar minion, not a zombie. They changed her type again. So she gets this printing, not a zombie. Then they errata her to zombie without printing a card. She gets put in a bunch of zombie commander decks. People like that she's a zombie. And then, again, they make her not a zombie forever after Conspiracy.
Thrice reborn, one
Yeah.
might say.
This made specific people mad, but if you were a casual player who only knew the cards that were physical and didn't know that errata was even a thing, you would never know that this was even a zombie at all.
Yeah, I am really low on errata, and I think this might be the greatest example of why, short of the Dominaria burn errata that exists, changing creature types in this 3 times is so dumb.
But yeah,
That's my only thought.
there's Phage. Okay. Well, we've hyped it up so many times. We're finally here. It's time for Lorwyn, the big fall set of 2007. This was huge for me. I loved Lorwyn. I bought at least 2 copies of that Boggart Feast theme deck so that I could make a really powerful Goblins deck. I bought the Elemental's Path. My friend bought Elvish Predation. And my other friend who loved playing Control played the Blue-White Merfolk deck.
It really hit on all of the things that your group loves.
Yeah, nobody played the Kithkin, and I thought they were cool, but I just wasn't really a white aggro player at that time. This is what Joe's into. Do you know any of the mechanics of Lorwyn?
Do we have Wither?
No, not yet. That's in Shadowmoor.
Oh, shoot. Persist?
Nope, also Shadowmoor.
Then no.
Okay, you do know Changeling,
Okay, yes, that's true.
and you also know Evoke.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Things you might not have known were from this include Clash.
I have heard of this before.
Each player reveals their top card of their deck. The higher mana value wins the Clash. Then each player may put it on the top or bottom of their deck.
Yes. So the reason I know about Clash is that one of my pet projects is a cube in which both players start Bolas' Citadel, and
Right, yeah,
someone recommended that Clash cards would be sweet in that cube specifically.
that makes sense. Champion, such as champion a creature or champion a merfolk.
Yep.
And Hideaway.
Oh, yeah, I should have thought of that one.
Yeah, this is where Shelldock Isle comes from, and Hideaway originally has this enters tapped in the reminder text.
Very cool.
Also, it is always 4 cards.
Yeah, I did know there was always 4 cards here, and they eroded it for Streets of New Capenna.
Just to cover it, the 8 tribes of the set. So we have the 5 here, the obvious ones. And then we also have Treefolk in green, white, and black. Giants in red and white. Elementals are both in 5 color and mono red. There's like a separation between the greater elementals and the flamekin.
Okay.
And famously, fairies. No theme deck for fairies, but was the most impactful thing
It
from
was the
constructed.
constructed theme deck.
Yeah, the constructed theme deck. And then changelings don't really count as a tribe.
I guess that's the glue that makes the 8 tribes work together.
Yep. Okay. Just for Jake, all black cards. Face Vaulter, yes, only works in a goblins deck, but the goblins theme of Lorwyn in black red was very aristocratic.
Love that. Huh. Whenever a goblin you control is put into a graveyard from play, put a. Oh. All right.
This gets very big routinely.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say one dead goblin and you're already off to the races on this.
Mm-hmm. Mog War Marshal represents +3/+3 over the course of its life.
Yeah, absolutely. That makeshift mannequin is a classic.
I didn't realize it, but Mannequin sees a lot of constructed play in this era.
I can see that. Instant Speed Reanimate is just very powerful. How far away from Innistrad are we?
Pretty far.
Okay, so we're not Grizzle Branding people, but we're still doing some crazy stuff. And then Marsh Flitter. This card seems familiar to me. Goblin Rogue tokens, huh?
Yep, tokens have classes because Morningtide is going to care about classes.
Okay, I mean, this has got some Bogart on Dragonheart vibes to me.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
It's way more specific, but that's how I feel about this card.
Yep, I like all these cards still, and I think they are very Jake.
I think that's true.
Okay. Cool for cubes. Gale Powder Mage recently replaced Philia, which was way too strong for Amankar in Amankar, and I think this is pretty much the right power level for that kind of effect. Anybody who would like a card similar to Philia and feels that the dog is just too strong, consider Gale Powder Mage.
Yeah, or if you hate dogs, anyone this effect.
If they hate dogs, they're not listening to this anyway.
I don't know if that's true. I think we've got several listeners that hate dogs. That's a negative. To be clear, I love dogs, but I suspect there's some dog haters out
I
there.
can't believe any dog haters can stand listening to Jake at all.
Yeah, if you're a dog hater, defend yourself in the comments.
What do you think about Gale Powder Mage in lower powers?
I think it's sweet. I was here in this metaphysical sense when you were suggesting this for Amankar, and I think it's a really cool fit there. I think just hitting creatures is reasonable, even though it does take away some interesting lines.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a very cool card.
Have you seen Malicious Pride before?
I think this is in Bolt Cube.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah, I think this is in Bolt Cube. And if it is, then yes. And if not, it's a card that reminds me of it.
This can get quite out of hand.
Yeah, there's no way this is in Bolt Cube.
Yeah, I think it's too powerful.
But something similar is there.
But I love that that was your first thought.
There's definitely some weird Kithkin stuff going on there. But I guess it's not this one.
Briarhorn. I think this is so cool.
This I have no notes. This is a sick design.
Blocking with a 6/6. Very nice. And Lignify. Green removal. Kind of.
Kind of. There are cubes that want this. I don't. But there are cubes that want this.
Doran. I don't know that it sees a lot of cube play. It sees some amount of constructed play, and it's very well known in Commander. And I think the effect is well known.
Yes.
in player understanding of the game, but I don't actually know where it gets played.
When you said that tree folk were a tribe here in Abzan, I thought, all right, so Doran must be from this set because I am aware of this card's existence.
Yeah, I think everybody just knows about it, whether they know where to use it or not.
Yeah,
Cube staples, there are so many. Pestermite is kind of infamous, mostly for being a Splinter Twin combo card, but I think is also just a very solid card, even in Pauper Cubes.
I think it's very cool.
Ponder, also, amazingly, this is its first printing, and it goes on to be quite the limited staple, as well as some constructed formats.
Yeah, some constructed formats, like nearly every constructed format where it's legal.
Where it's legal, yep, that's the critical part. And Cloudgut Ranger, which is like a peasant cube all-star favorite, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I mean, this card is iconic. I feel like this was in some like really early cube that I played, and I definitely grew to appreciate it.
Mirror Entity, dump all your mana, make your team huge. Also has this weird effect where if you somehow can control your opponent, you can kill their board.
Yeah, that is weird.
Muldrifter and Shriekmaw, just famous parts of cube design, in my opinion.
I think that's true. I think that fear makes me much lower on Shriekmaw
Oh, for
than
sure.
I would otherwise be.
And non-artifact, non-black.
Yeah, but I think that Shriekmaw is really cool. As a design, I really like it. I think Evoke is a really cool space when it costs mana to do still. I do think it's like really special. Like I think the coolest thing about Shriekmaw is how many cubes still play this, despite it being a random uncommon from 2007.
With multiple downsides to its design.
Yeah, and the art is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely adore the art for Shriekmaw.
Okay. Personal favorites. Again, we had to break past the four because I just love so many cards in this set. I love this set. Some of my all-time favorite cards come from this set. Anti's Hovel is from the cycle of check. You must reveal a creature type that it cares about from your hand to make it come in untapped. Then it taps for black or red. In this case, Goblin.
It's a goblin snarl.
Oh, that's a good way to phrase it. And then Warren Pilferers has some really fantastic Wayne Reynolds art. I actually like the art a lot more than the effect. It is a 3/3 for 5 Gravedigger. When it enters, you get a creature card back from your graveyard. If you get a goblin back, it gains haste. But the art is the really special part. And then Spellsetter Sprite, classic, maybe something that is surprising to others. That is one of my favorites, but I love the art. I love the effect. I like fairies a lot. I like it a lot more after it's out of constructed because it definitely haunted me whenever I was trying to play goblins against it. But when I get further into modern, I'm going to be really trying to play fairies whenever I can afford Bitter Blossoms and they're not banned.
That makes sense.
Boggart Birthright I loved. I love being able to get my best goblin back. I love being able to get Tarfire back, or there's a Goblin Edict that's going to be in this block that target player sacrifices a creature. Getting that back is really cool.
Very cool.
Boggart Mob, one of my favorite cards at this time, especially. I was playing a mono black goblins deck for years because people just didn't even know that you could do that. Mono black goblins that plays little 1/1 goblins with fear, and then every time you hit them, you get another goblin. It's like Krenko with extra steps. Turn your goblins into goblins.
It is like go with a lot of extra steps, but that's charming. Like his vibe in the art.
And it's a 5/5. And then Wart Boggart Auntie, absolute one of my favorite goblins. I love the art. I love those little weirdo guys with their weird shaped eyes. I love Wart's crazy face. I love doing the Boggart Birthright every turn, getting any goblin card back from my hand or back from my graveyard to my hand. It could be Tarfire every turn, or it could be anything. I played it in Legacy for a little bit, even though it wasn't very good there. This was my first Elder Dragon Highlander commander that I remember. It could have been Ib Halfheart because that was my first rare in Time Spiral block, but the goblins doing something was definitely my first deck that I was able to build a full 100 cards around.
That's sweet. I think it's funny that fear isn't spelled out in any of these cards because I don't think I could tell you what fear does off the top of my head.
And they're like, fear. They don't tell you anything about it.
Fear is it can be can't be blocked except by black and artifact creatures or black and creatures that share type or color with it.
No, it is. You're right. It's black and artifact, and it would later be updated to intimidate, so other colors could use it. Exactly like you said, and
Okay.
that is shares a color with or artifact.
Yep. Okay.
And then they would finally land on menace years later, unfortunately. Like
Beautiful design. If this card had menace, it would be like way cooler.
Yeah, I fully agree. Okay. Fun facts about the set. This is the first appearance of Oblivion Ring. We would later get Banishing Light as an updated phrasing with a single trigger instead of being separate triggers. O-rings are now a permanent, like a staple of how white interacts with things on the board, and this is the first time we got
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah, I didn't know that this is where a ring came from,
Mm-hmm.
but that's very cool.
Nova Chaser, I thought was so sick. 10-2 trample for 4, and you can champion Flamekin Harbinger, which is like how you find it in the first place. And then whenever they get rid of the Nova Chaser, you get your Harbinger back and you can do the trigger again. Also, if you have Incandescent Soulstoke, which I showed earlier, you can cheat this out as an 11-3 trample haste.
Yeah, wow. So you've got like a little elemental sneak attack deck
Yeah,
going on.
this art in this stat line was like the coolest thing in Magic to me at the time. Even though I loved goblins, this was just so sick. Like, this is the dream. This is going off, getting to play a 10-2 trample and keep it on the battlefield.
Yeah, that is sick.
First appearance of Planeswalkers. We've talked them up for a long time. What you may not know, Jake, I can't remember how familiar you are with this, but Planeswalker's original design was very prescriptive. So the first Garrick would create a wolf, and then the next turn it would double your wolves, and then the third turn it would do something like Overrun. And the problem was, if the opponent removed the wolf that he made his first turn, then his second turn and third turn would make no sense. So prescriptive, and didn't feel like they had any agency whatsoever. And so eventually they settled on this. They have abilities and they can act intelligently based on the situation. But they would save that first design that was prescriptive for sagas.
That is very cool. As you're describing it, I thought that's a saga, and I particularly thought of Furia's Retribution, where if you kill the angel, stone cold nothing for
Yep.
the next two chapters, and you just get to watch it sit there taking up doing nothing. So they were onto something there,
It makes sense for a story to play out the same way every time, but it doesn't make a
right?
sense for a planeswalker who's supposed to be your intelligent companion.
Though that does make me think that a saga that somehow has like choose an ending as an ability would be kind of interesting.
Oh
Like it's a
yeah.
story that's told and the ending is kind of unknown, and then you make a decision exclusively for the last chapter.
Mm-hmm.
That would be kind of a fascinating design space. I mean, Grook Wildspeaker, what isn't there to say about this card? One of the original five and still one of probably the best three designed planeswalkers of all time.
Mm-hmm. Easily the best of the original five, in my opinion. In terms of design, I loved Chandra
Yeah,
so much, but just as a character, not as a card.
right. And I think that Jace Baleron's also
Yeah,
a
party.
really good design.
He's
But
nicknamed Party Jace now.
there's something about Garrick that's timeless in a way that Jace isn't. I think there are plenty of cubes where Jace is very cool. Garrick is cool in so many cubes.
I agree. He's right up there with Liliana the Veil to me.
Yep,
They got it just right. He feels dangerous
100%.
and powerful, but not quite over the top.
Right. His ult is perfectly sized. He's spending loyalty to impact the board. His ult isn't oversized. The Wandering Emperor is obviously very powerful as a planeswalker, but I think that it borrows some of its lessons from this Garrick, which is that the plus only matters if you're doing other things already. And then you have a minus to defend itself, and then in this case, the Wandering Emperor has two minuses instead of an ult. But this is also a situation where you're encouraged to spend loyalty to impact the board, and I think that's what makes these interesting. And I'll go as far as to say I think most people who don't like planeswalkers, the cards that make them feel that way are the ones that are impacting the board while gaining loyalty. It's just a miserable play pattern.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we have the Black Hideaway Land.
Yeah. How many of the other hideaway lands do you know?
Okay, so we have Windbreast Kites in white,
Yep.
blue is Shelldock Isle,
Here's black.
this is black, red is picture it in my head.
Spine Rock Knoll.
Yeah,
What's
and
the
I think
what's the
it's
condition?
it's damage, right?
Uh-huh. How much damage?
I think it's 6.
If you've dealt 7 damage this turn.
Yeah, okay. And then green, no clue.
Really? Mosswort Bridge.
Yeah, so in my mind, Shelldock Isle far and away the most iconic of these.
Bridge is very popular in Commander because it's easy to achieve in Commander.
Yeah, that makes sense. And our listeners are starting to realize I don't play any commander, so I didn't know that. I think of Windbrisk Kites as being the second most iconic by far.
I agree.
That may just be because I think it sees the most cube play
Yeah,
after
I think you're right.
Sheldon Isle.
Hmm.
I just think that Windbrisk Kites is iconic, and it's such an interesting design space. The first time I played with that card was in Ryan Sachs's build around cube, and I used it to flash in one of your favorite cards. Oh, well, no, I was your favorite card was on the battlefield. So I attacked with a Delny,
Oh, good.
and then I cast Blood Artist off Windbrisk Heights to
Whoa.
blow them out on, and I needed Delny to die in order to drain them for lethal, and it
Whoa.
was turn 4 of turns. So
That's
it's my last chance to
incredible.
win the game. And so I have loved the card ever since getting to do that. My opponent didn't love that happened, but they were appreciative that that was a pretty cool story moment. And so I really like that card. I'm excited to see what it does in 100 Ornithopters, where it has recently been added.
Helltooth Hollow here, I think, is just garbage. And I think that the fact that it's each player has no cards in hand has to be a balancing factor because you don't want to cast a discard spell in the opponent's draw step. So because it cheats timing and black has mind rots, you don't want to be able to do them at instant speed. But both players having to have no cards, not just them, but also you, is kind of crazy.
I mean, that just that just like barely happens. Like both players being in top deck mode. And if this is on the battlefield, right? Like if you've got like land number 8 in your hand, you just don't play it, right? Like you recognize that you're gonna play your 8th land and they're gonna get a free spell. I
Yeah,
I don't really see, and also it's not like the black ones can't get cast off other like Shelldock Isle can also cast Mind Rot at instant speed.
that's true. Yeah, I really that's my only idea for why they would have done this, and
No, and like to me, it
quite
reads like
bad.
maybe. To be fair, if it was just one of you, their case would probably be really easy to do. Like that might just be too easy to say like only one of you, but maybe they should have just picked a different. Like honestly, like number of cards in graveyard strikes me as also a black thing you could do here. That
Hmm.
one player being hellbent is probably too easy to achieve, right? Like maybe your black aggro deck can just go nuts with this. Two players is like the other end of the spectrum, super super hard to achieve. And then if you go like total number of cards in hand is X, like that just gets really complicated. But number of cards in graveyard feels like it's easy to track, but also could be used for this. But I don't know. I
Yeah.
agree that this looks stone cold unplayable.
Well, speaking of, there were a lot of cards in the one people did not like. Clash, most people just didn't like any of those cards. There were a couple of champion cards that did well, but champion is also pretty easy to blow out the opponent if you play correctly with removal. They took some big swings with this set, and it turned out to be the worst selling large set at the time in history.
Wow.
A lot of people have a lot of fond memories of Lorwyn, especially the aesthetic, and they forget what the limited play was actually like,
It's a cult classic.
and they forget how bad some of the mechanics were, and as a result, we have not gone back to Lorwyn until
Next year.
next year. So that's like 2007 to 2026, 19 years gap. There's a reason for that. Despite people loving it, despite people asking Mark Rosewater over and over and over, please take us back to Lorwyn, they didn't do it for a reason. And the reason was worst selling large set in ever at the time, and continued to be the worst selling large set for a long time after.
Fascinating. I didn't know that. I would have assumed that the Planeswalkers would have made it sell like crazy by themselves.
Yeah, you'd think so, but apparently not. Okay, so that's Lorwyn, which means we're done with sets. Now, as a little bonus content, I'm going to take you through just a couple of things from the era, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
So here's a deck from Grand Prix Krakow 2007 called Muck. Muck Guile. You can see Guile at the bottom there, one of the elemental incarnations. If you counter a spell, you get to exile it, and then you can play it without paying its mana cost.
Are you counting your own ancestral visions?
No. But can you guess
Okay.
what Muck means?
Can I guess what muck means?
Mono you control.
Interesting.
Muck.
Yeah, I would not have gotten that ever.
I don't know how popular that slang was around other eras, if it first started with this one or if it had been for a long time, but I definitely would not have recognized it at this time. Other decks in the top 8 there that you can see include Pickles, which we talked about last year, the Pickles lock.
Yep. Right, with Brian Elemental,
Uh huh.
piloted by Paul Cheon.
Yep.
That's pretty funny.
And then Fairies is getting popular here, even though Morning Tide doesn't exist yet.
Yep.
And the Makeshift Mannequin that we talked about earlier.
What are they reanimating with Makeshift Mannequin?
They're getting back Muldrifter,
Sick.
Shriekmaw,
Sick.
Venser,
Also sick.
Riftwing Cloudskate, which bounces a permanent to its owner's hand.
Oh, I know Riffing Crownscape Bones.
Good. Epocrisite, which I talked about earlier.
Wow.
And if it dies, it will suspend.
Yeah, I mean that's sick as hell. like, like it seems like it was good. I think so. Really, Mannequin was 2007 scam.
Yeah, it's just a value thing. It is not at all a reanimator deck that's trying to cheat things out.
Right. It's actually just scam where you need 4 mana to do it, and you actually have to pay mana for the cards, which makes it cool instead of stupid.
I love that. Evoking Shriekmaw and then cheating Shriekmaw right back out to kill another thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome.
Okay, so that's Muck. A deck and slang lesson. Tings. Do you know Balancing Act?
Nope.
Each player chooses a number of permanents they control, equal to the number of permanents controlled by the player who controls the fewest, then sacrifices the rest. Each player discard cards the same way.
All right, so we got balance, but sort of fixed.
But it's the total permanents. It's not. They don't. It doesn't check
Right.
creatures and lands separately.
Right.
But if you'll notice these lands here, Ancient Spring, Archaeological Dig, Thermal Crevice, Irrigation Ditch, Sulfur Vent, Tinder Farm. These are all lands which sacrifice to produce double mana. They tap for a single mana or they sack to do double mana. So you can sack all your lands to cast Balancing Act, floating a bunch of mana, and the opponent will have to sacrifice all their permanents.
Wow.
And then you use your floating mana to cast Terravore.
Lone Cube staple. Yeah, that's sick. So this is like a Armageddon prison deck,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't actually like playing against, but in retrospect, that's very cool.
And then you've got Fire Ice, Orim's Chant, Remand. You are just buying time, playing these pretty bad lands one at a time until you can completely blow out the opponent. This deck is
That's
also
wild.
playing Divining Top, Draco, and Erratic Explosion as a 16 damage combo.
Yeah, I was gonna say I would like this deck a lot more if it didn't have the one of Sensei's Divining Top hanging out.
Yeah. But the reason we're here is Tings. So Tings and Mize are very emblematic of the slang of the era of around this time. So Mize, to win when you don't deserve to top deck the Tings you need to be rewarded by an opponent's bad luck. This was extremely popular in the tournament scene phrase. Any idea what Mize or Tings might mean?
No, other than what you just read right there.
Mize stems from might as well. You might as well draw what you need. You might as well top deck Bonfire of the Damned. And so
Okay.
you might as well, and you're mising well.
Right. So you're top decking well.
Yeah.
Got it.
Tings is just short for beatings. So the Tings in the Balancing Tings deck is Terravore. You're going to win. The only way you can win in this deck is through beatings, and it's the
Okay.
Terravore.
All right. I do often say that deck names are really unoriginal today, but I will also grant you that there's just no way I would have ever guessed what
Yeah.
it stood for.
So that's the slang. Hulk Flash.
So we got Protean Hulk Flash, and we're getting
This is a combo I did not know about. So Hulk in this deck, here's the target that you can see them. What do you think you go get whenever you flash and sack Hulk, Protean Hulk?
okay. So Protean Hulk, I get 6 mana worth of stuff, right?
Yep.
So I think you get Karmic Guide first.
Mm-hmm. And Carrion Feeder, because it's the only thing that costs one. Karmic Guide brings back Hulk.
Yep. So then you get another one.
Yep. Sack Hulk to Feeder.
Yep. So you can then get Body Snatcher, which is another
Nope.
Karmic Guide.
We don't need that.
So I assume we're getting Kiki Jiki
Yep.
then.
And then we win. How do we win?
And so with Kiki Jiki, so we get Kiki Jiki on the stack. Oh, and Hulk is still there.
No, Hulk's dead.
Oh, because it's a Dice trigger,
Mm-hmm.
and Flash has killed it.
Yeah,
So
Flash kills
now we just have a Carrion Feeder and a Kiki Jiki.
And Karmic Guide.
Isn't Karma Guide? Oh, right. No, Karma Guide brought the Flash Hulk back. So now we copy the Karmic Guide with the Kiki Jiki, which lets us get our Hulk back
Nope,
again.
don't need Hulk. We activate Kiki-Jiki targeting Karmic Guide.
Yep.
We sack Kiki-Jiki to Carrion Feeder.
Oh, and so Carrion Feeder just becomes an infinity infinity.
That is one thing, but it can't attack. We are going to let our trigger resolve, get a Karmic Guide with haste. It brings back Kiki-Jiki. We tap Kiki-Jiki to target Karmic Guide. We sack Kiki-Jiki to Carrion Feeder.
Oh, so we have infinite Karmic
We have
Guides with
infinite
the Kiki
hasting
Jiki.
Karmic Guides.
Wow.
I had never heard of this combo, and I immediately put Karmic Guide into the Ancient Desert because Kiki-Jiki and Carrion Feeder are already there, and that is so sick.
I mean, that's sick. Do you have Hulk there?
No, I don't need Hulk. That's a bridge too far.
I know you don't need it. I was just, I was like, all right, that's pretty cool. I can't deny it.
There's also no old border Hulk.
That's that's fair. Yeah, that's really sick. I love that this deck has three source of plowshares in the sideboard. I I'm sure that's correct. It's just really funny to me that they're like, we do want these sometimes, but we will not be running source of
Well, I
plowshares in
mean,
the main.
you win on turn 2, and you have Daze and Force of Will. So,
You went on turn two.
yeah, because you flash Hulk.
Oh right, yeah. Turn one if you Gromox.
Yeah, you can. And you can brainstorm the combo pieces back into your deck.
Also, just have brainstorm counterbalance top if you just aren't there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you do have to have two exact specific cards in your hand, Flash and Hulk, for it to work.
Yeah, that's true. But you also have four mystical tutors, so you're gonna have eight flashes in your deck. Especially because with top, you can just get it. So this is a counterbalance top control deck that also is Flash Hulk Kikiing with 8x free counterspell backup.
Yep. And that's why Flash is banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage.
Yeah, because this was impossible in 2007, and so today, who even knows?
Who even knows?
Well, you could still do this, but I bet there's a lot next year stuff you can do.
The final lesson 2007. Do you know the card Scheherazade?
Yes, I do.
Can you describe the effects of the card Scheherazade?
Yeah, so I definitely can't get you all of the rules tech, but it basically says we play a sub game with I think 10 cards decks from our library, but maybe it's half rounded down. Basically, we play a sub game, and then each person who doesn't win that sub game loses half their life rounded up, I think.
In the real game.
In the real game, yes. So like you play the sub game, and then the loser loses that life in the real game, and then the real game.
Into the Dungeon here is an uncard that you play a game under the table, starting at 5 life. Actual Scheherazade, you just play exactly with your decks as they are. You set aside your current hand, deck, stack, everything. You then use your current decks to play a new game at full life, full game. Then you must go back to the main game. The thing is, people would play multiple copies of Scheherazade, so then you could
Right.
play a subgame in the subgame. Why am I showing you this card in 2007?
Do we change the deck size to 60 at this point?
No.
Is there some kind of copying spell effect that's relevant here?
No.
Because I know that that's like one of the super degenerate things you do here is like if you copy it and you have more cards in your deck, like you can,
Yeah, you can do some heinous things.
if your opponent can play one fewer sub game, you can just waste them.
Yeah, you can chain your way up.
Yeah, because it's any loser. But no, I don't know why. Other than maybe the card that you just showed.
No, the reason is this card was not banned in Legacy until 2007.
Holy, that's insane.
Yeah, you could play this card in regular paper Legacy. Play a Magic subgame using your libraries as your decks up until 2007.
That's truly wild.
Still popular in Old School. In fact, in Old School, my friend Dirk plays Scheherazade Burn, and there is like a wish effect where you can go get a card that you own that's not in the game, like from outside the game.
Right.
And his dream is to go 4 Scheherazade's deep, and in the fourth subgame, wish the Scheherazade off of the stack from the main game and bring it into a fifth subgame.
That is a Joe kind of dream.
Mm-hmm. Shout out Dirk.
All right, that's wild.
Yeah,
I'm totally blown away by this fact.
that's it. That's the end of the show. What a crazy year.
Well, this was awesome. Absolutely. I cannot wait for 2008.
I can't remember how we wrapped up the previous one.
I think we just go for it. Or we just leave this in exactly where neither of us remembers the outro we did last time, and then we just cut it.
And on that bombshell, this has been the second in a series where I'm going to take Jake through time. 2007 banger year. I can't promise that there will be any ones better than this. This one was extremely long, I know. Thank you for sticking through it. Heck of a year. Really impressive cards in standard at this time.
Absolutely. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, Bones. And I'll see you in 2008.
See you then. Bye.